He Who Remains, who's a Kang variant, definitely had one of the best villain introductions in the MCU. Sure, depending on who you talk to, it may have hurt the Loki show overall, but you can't deny that He Who Remains certainly made an impact. But now that Season 1 is done, can we stop for a second and truly analyze what He Who Remains was after and the steps he took to get there? Join me in another MCU villain spotlight where the focus is all on Kang. Yeah, look, even though this wasn't technically Kang, I'm just gonna call him Kang for ease. What was Kang's actual plan, and would it count as a success or a failure? Let's get into it. So, be honest, were you surprised when Kang popped out of that elevator?
Not what you were expecting,
I know that the show was eagerly hinting at Kang, but I gotta admit, I was convinced that King Loki was going to be at the end of the rainbow and we were just going to get a Kang tease in a post-credit scene. But alas, there Kang was in all of his purple-wearing, apple-munching glory. Where did he get that apple, by the way? If he's been alive for 1,000,000 lifetimes, that seems to imply he doesn't need to eat food, so was he just eating the fruit in order to just be a jerk? Maybe. But anyways, a lot of the episode had the engaging Jonathan Majors basically lay out Kang's whole backstory, complete with handy-dandy 3D models. Way to go, Kang! You knew you had a big speech to make, so you strove to make it visually engaging. But this backstory not only explains how this Kang became He Who Remains, it also hints at a much darker, deeper personality than his inherent table-hopping goofiness would have you expect. So, to break it down, Kang was a scientist living in the 31st century who may or may not have been going by the name of Nathaniel Richards. Scientists in the future must be wicked smart because this Kang realized that there were alternate universes out there all stacked on top of one another like a giant multiversal sandwich. I wonder how he figured that out. My guess is he was probably doing some quantum experiments because whenever you have to explain time travel or parallel universes or anything like that, you just throw the word quantum in front of everything, right? So this Kang discovered the multiverse, and I guess other variants were also discovering the multiverse around the same time, and they all found ways to cross over to one another to say hi and exchange their favorite apple pie recipes. But in a multiverse with infinite possibilities, of course there were going to be some bad apples in the mix. More conquer-focused variants wanted to travel from multiverse to multiverse, taking control of everything. So when Alioth was discovered, who was a creature created from all the tears in reality and capable of consuming time and space itself, the Kang variant we met sprung into action. He somehow took control of Alioth and used it to wipe out all the other multiverses that were going to war with each other and made it so there was only one timeline. And I think this is actually a pretty fascinating character moment. Like, yes, on the surface, you can see how this Kang variant, who is now officially He Who Remains, is the sort of good guy for putting an end to the Multiversal War and stopping all the evil Kang the Conqueror variants from wiping out everything. But also, couldn't you say that He Who Remains became a conqueror too? With a seemingly lack of hesitation, this Kang wiped out all other branches of the timeline and made only one where he controlled everything. Like, if Jonathan Majors wasn't being super quirky and a little sad while explaining all of this, we'd probably consider him the main bad guy. So now with only one sacred timeline, let's talk about the TVA. This Kang says that he created the TVA and the Timekeepers as this ruthlessly efficient organization, and they would prune any variants and stop the timeline from fracturing. This was said to be because if they let the multiverse expand again, then all the Kang the Conquerors would arrive and another multiversal war would start. But now, here's a question I have. Why did He Who Remains hide himself? Why did he have to create the Timekeepers as these omniscient fake beings that dictate the flow of time while he was secretly doing it from his castle at the end of eternity? Would there have been an issue with him telling the truth to people? Did he just do it so he could be left alone without question, or was there a deeper reason behind it? You know, a reason besides because the show needs it to happen. I think maybe He Who Remains, Kang, wanted to hide himself because the optics of what he was doing looked bad. Can you imagine being a part of this sacred timeline and learning that the guy in charge just wiped out every single other universe to stop variants of himself from taking over? Yeah, I'd probably want to revolt too. Also, we get a pretty good idea of what this Kang thinks about free will, as he seemed to have no qualms about erasing variant memories and making them agents at the TVA instead of telling people the truth. Like, sure, you'd run the risk of unmotivated, disloyal employees if you give the choice to be either pruned or work for the TVA as an agent, but then at least least you wouldn't have a mass panic like we saw at the end of Loki, right? So let's talk next about Kang's actual plan in the Loki show. As we learned, Kang was done with the job and wanted to move on because, as he put it, he was tired. So he enacted a series of events that led Loki and Sylvie to his doorstep because they would be perfect to lead the TVA together, or they would kill him and start the multiverse. He seemed pretty fine with either option, but like, did anyone else get the idea that this was somehow exactly what he wanted? Like, he manipulated events in Sylvie and Loki's life and turned Sylvie into this no-nonsense, revenge-driven individual and then suddenly asks her to potentially not kill him. It's like if I put a monkey right in the middle of a banana plantation and say, hey, you can either eat all these bananas or not, it's really your choice. What do you think is going to happen? I think a radical thought is that he who remains couldn't die by his own hand and found a way to get someone there to kill him. Or, you know, on the other hand, Kang could have been telling the absolute truth when he said he really didn't care one way or another what happened. Maybe he brought Loki and Sylvie there because he wanted the two polar opposites to fight it out. He would know Sylvie would want to kill him, and he would also know Loki would want to be there and rule over everything. So what happens when you pit those two ideologies against each other? There was a pretty even split over what could happen, and maybe that was what was so exciting about Kang's thinking. The most exciting thing moving forward in the MCU has to be the impact all these Kang variants will have over everything. He who remains is dead, and now all the variants will come out of the woodwork. And I wonder what this villain's motivation is going to be moving forward. Thanos was one of the most engaging big bads we've ever seen in the MCU because his motivations, while extreme, came with a hint of sympathy. We didn't agree with his methods, but the idea of saving the universe because of eventual overpopulation was something we could relate to in a sense. Is Kang the Conqueror going to be similar to that? Or is he just going to be a one-note world domination type of villain? Maybe the MCU can have its cake and eat it too. What I mean is, maybe because there will be so many variants of Kang running amok now, we could see all types of big bad Kangs. For example, maybe in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we'll see the conquering-focused, no-nonsense Kang that just wants to take over everything and have him be a villain Ant-Man can defeat. But then in a later movie, we could meet a different Kang with more complex motivations. Like, maybe he wants to destroy our timeline and just start over because things are so messy now. And then maybe in Loki Season 2, we can meet a Kang variant who rules the TVA but with an iron fist, showing the dark side of what these Kangs are capable of. I'm just saying there's a lot of exciting options for Kang down the line. And to think, whatever the big bad Kang's plan will be down the line will all start to happen just because he who remains is dead. So yeah, Sylvie pulled a Star-Lord, but she at least had better reasons for it, right? Alright, now that we're at the end, I can say what I wanted to say the whole time. Kang is a fake bad guy. The secret mastermind behind everything is Miss Minutes. She's pure evil and running everything with an iron fist and needs to be stopped and... Oh no, she's right behind me, isn't she?